This is the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy Podcast, Episode 70, Constructed Wetlands for Water Quality, Insights, and a Farmer Perspective. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason. We'll begin today with Jill Kostel. She's with the Wetlands Initiative. I asked her to tell us a little bit about herself and what she does at the initiative.
Yes, I'm the Water Resources Program Director. I have a background in civil and environmental engineering, and I manage our Smart Wetlands program at the Wetlands Initiative. And the Wetlands Initiative is a non-for-profit located here in Illinois. We design, restore, and create wetlands. We do this work through innovation, collaboration, and using sound science to improve water quality, habitat for plants and wildlife, and our climate.
What's the difference between a constructed wetland and what the Wetlands Initiative does?
Yeah, the majority of the work that we do is what we call wetland restoration. And with a restored wetland, your goal is to restore the natural hydrology and native vegetation in a former wetland that was either drained, farmed, or otherwise modified. So it doesn't have its hydrology and its plant life anymore. And the purpose of this practice is really to restore wetland functions, habitat, and diversity to something similar to what was its original condition before being modified. A constructed wetland is an engineered ecosystem that can be built anywhere but on a former wetland. It is essentially an artificial wetland ecosystem designed to mimic a natural wetland's ability to clean water. In this case, the wetlands are sited to intercept a tile main and designed to provide the optimal conditions needed for the wetland processes to remove excess nutrient as much as possible. And in this case, our main goal is nitrate removal, since tile drainage is responsible for most of our agricultural nitrate load in our streams and lakes. But I would say because we are using native vegetation and developing this shallow emergent marsh, they can also provide valuable wildlife, waterfowl, and pollinator habitat. And this constructed wetlands is what we do through our Smart Wetlands program.
When you're thinking about wetland restoration, how do you know if a wetland was there previously?
We can tell by the soils. Wetland soils have specific characteristics, and those characteristics stay even if the hydrology or the water levels have been modified, they've been drained off. Those soil characteristics remain, and that's one of the ways we identify a former wetland, is looking at the soils.
In the case of the wetland that you've been working with Farmer Rex Newton on, and we'll hear from him in just a bit, is that a restored or a constructed wetland?
That is a constructed wetland for cropland tile drainage treatment, which is the official conservation practice name. And so that was designed specifically to intercept a number of tiles. We put them, 2 tiles, that means that we're coming through their property, and joined them into one tile, and that goes directly into the wetland. The wetland processes occur, that water stays in there for a while. Wetlands are doing all the awesome things that they do, and then we have a structure at the end that controls the water levels, and then the water eventually then goes right back out into the creek it would have gone to, directly if it wasn't intercepted by the wetland. And the water leaving the wetland has a lot less nitrate than it did coming into the wetland.
Do you verify that through sampling or some other form?
Yes, we have monitored 2 other constructed wetlands. But yeah, we've done watering. They're actually quite easy to monitor because you can just monitor and take a water sample of what's coming into the wetland and what's leaving the wetland, and you'll see a difference in the concentration and the load. So we can estimate how much we're removing. Now, the wetland, that will be, monitoring will begin on that this year. So we'll have a better sense of how well that wetland is working. But in general, constructed wetlands, if they're designed correctly and sized correctly, we expect at least a 50% nitrate removal. Some of our wetlands remove up to 80-90% of the nitrate coming in.
And how do they do that? Is it just captured by the plants? Does it stay put? Is it removed in some other form?
Yes, we are really relying on the microbes that are living in the sediment and on the plants within the wetlands. Plants do take up nutrients to grow, but those plants also die, so they can release some of those nutrients back into the water column. But the process that's really sustainable is the ones done by the microbes, which is converting that nitrate into a nitrogen gas. So the microbes will do there if there's nitrate, and they will breathe the nitrate in the absence of oxygen. So you want to have a little bit of an anaerobic layer in the wetland. And then the carbon from the plants and the sediment is what provides them their energy to do that work. So if you have carbon, you have nitrate, and you have microbes, they will keep on removing nitrate forever. It's a very sustainable process.
What considerations should farmers and landowners keep in mind when considering a wetland for their properties?
Well, we want to make sure we have somewhere where there's a tile main that we can intercept. We feel like somewhere between 30 to 200 acres of tile drainage is a good size for these. It doesn't take too much land out of production because we want the wetland treatment area to be at least 1% of the drainage area captured, and then therefore the total project size is closer to 5%. So we like those odd corners or areas that may be slightly wet or hard to farm. Those are kind of the best areas to put it. But they also have to really consider that this is we don't say permanent practice, but we are excavating, we are digging, essentially a pond and not filling it up. We only have about at maximum 2 feet of water in these wetlands because that's the ecosystem that removes is best for removing nitrogen. So they have to, and the other thing you have to consider that it's a capital cost. This is not, of all the tile treatment practices, this is probably the most expensive one. However, it's also one of the most cost-effective practices given the amount of nitrate these wetlands can remove, and as well as their longevity with very low maintenance. The good thing is that we currently have farm bill programs that can provide financial assistance to help offset some of those costs in installing a wetland. All wetlands play a very major role in reducing nutrients, even, restored wetlands, constructed wetlands. Wetlands are often referred to as nature's kidneys, as they can clean, purify water by removing the pollutants. And so restored or constructed wetlands can do this. Constructed wetlands, we are just designing it such that we're really trying to optimize that nutrient removal.
Jill Kostel is with the Wetlands Initiative. She mentioned a farm that they've been working on putting in a constructed wetland that's operated by Rex Newton. I spoke with him as well. I started by asking Rex to tell me just a little bit about himself and his operation.
Oh boy. Well, I started farming in 75, so this is going to be my 50th year. In the early 80s, I started dabbling with no-till because the NRCS office had a planner that they were letting us use to demonstrate, so I did some strips and what have you, yielded challenge, I guess you'd call it. And I'll be darned, the no-till was about a little over 6 bushel better. And I thought, well, that's not bad. So I've started growing there with a no-till, and the attachments back in that era weren't all the greatest. No-till was kind of in the back burner. So I've grown that, and I've seen benefits from it. The one landlord is pretty conservation minded, so he's the one that put the wetland in.
Why is it you wanted to put the wetland in?
I'd say it was both of us, but I left it up to the landlord to make the decision because I had gone to a meeting that Jill spoke at, and I thought, well, this is interesting. So I approached the landlord and told him we ought to look into this, whether we do it or anything or not. So that's when Jill and Gene come out to our farm and visit with him, and he got interested in it, and that's come to happen. We got one in there. It drains 60 acres of tile, and I think the wetland's 2.8 acres. But we also got pollinator plot and stuff like that around it too. So it was pretty easy sell, really, mainly because he's pretty conservation minded. And we've grown that. Now we're concentrating on nutrient management with cover crops, 6 years of cover crops. And strip till. I started doing some of that about 4 years ago. And Todd, in 1982 was the last year I moldboard plowed, and it was a disaster because 83 ended up being a drought year, and that corn on corn moldboard plowed made 56 bushel to the acre. And then across the road, I no-tilled corn on bean stubble, and it made 125 bushel the acre. So that was another selling point to change my operation.
From the farmer's perspective, after the fact, is there much management that has to be done with the wetland? Do you have to care for it very much?
Well, not so far. I mean, they got a person that comes in and checks on it and tries to manage the species of weeds that we don't want. Right now, we got some cattails, and I'm sure that's from the seed bank. You know, when you dig down that deep, well, you're going to get some seeds from way back. So we're going to start sampling the water coming in and the sampling of the water going out. And that way I got some real stats that I can use on both sides. I got corn and soybeans, and I'd like to take some out of those tile lines to test. So I even got a comparison there. One side will be corn and one side will be beans. So then I'll have nitrogen on one side of the creek to test, and then cover crop on the bean stuff, or on the corn stalks going to beans on the other side. So I'm kind of excited about seeing how that's going to prove to me whether I'm doing the right thing or not. I feel like the science is telling me I'm doing the right thing, so I feel comfortable there. But I think this would be more of a selling point, so to speak.
Yeah. So if you take tile line samples out of the cornfield, out of the wetland field, and then out of the soybean field, plus if you were able to convince them to pick up samples prior to your cornfield, after the cornfield, but before the wetland, out of the creek, and then before and after the soybean field, you'll have a whole lot of data to show what really is happening across the board. Across the board on all three of your fields, and then what the total load is coming out, and what it looked like going in too. Fantastic. That's really good stuff. I hope that's able to take place. Any advice for farmers and landowners who are considering adopting a wetland? I mean, you were there, I'm sure, as they were building it, trying to figure out where to place it, those sorts of things. What do you suggest?
Well, you got to be patient, for one thing, because it seemed like it took so long for the seeds to get started and stuff like that, your pollinators, plots, and then you have invasive weeds you got to control. As far as the soil and work that they did, that was fine. And then starting to see how it was going to really work was kind of fun to me, because I'd go down there and look and start seeing some different birds. And I don't know my bird names, species, but they were different. And then the monarchs showing up. It just kind of gives you a good sense that this has got to be good. And like I said, if I get some test results on the nitrates and stuff that it is removing, it'll be that much more rewarding, I'm hoping. So basically, it helps, Todd, when you got a landlord that's interested in saving the soil for the next generation.
Rex Newton is a conservation-minded farmer from Marshall County, Illinois, that has been working with his landowners to improve their properties. In this case, by deploying a constructed wetland. We also talked today on this episode 70 of the Nutrient Loss Reduction Podcast with Jill Kostel from the Wetlands Initiative. She was working with Rex and the property owner to put the constructed wetland into place. You've been listening to the Nutrient Loss Reduction Podcast from the University of Illinois. It is produced in conjunction with Rachel Curry and Nicole Haverback. I'm Todd Gleason.